Next, now it's time for Entre Nous on Paris Direct. And my guest today is a French maitre d' who has made an impressive career for himself as a TV presenter in the UK. His name is Fredsirieix, and British viewers know him best from the reality show First Dates. He's also come out with a book about all of the places that he loves in the UK called Seriously British. Fred, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on France 24.
How are you? Thank you very much for having me.
Well,
actually, my book, Seriously British, is really about all the things that the French think about the Brits. So it's about our differences as two different countries, because we couldn't be further apart. The Brits don't like to offend. They don't like to say anything that's going to put anybody in a situation, that's going to embarrass them. Whereas the French say whatever they think, whenever they want. It doesn't matter what it is. They just say it as it is.
That is certainly true. And we're going to talk a bit more about your book and those cultural differences in just a minute. But first, just give us some background for those of our viewers who don't perhaps know you so well. How did a Frenchman from Limoges end up moving to the UK and having such a great career in TV? How did it happen?
Well, I moved to start my career in hospitality. I wanted to work in the Premier League of restaurants and work with the very best. And this is what I did at 20 years old. I was an Anglophile. I loved everything Anglo-Saxon. And I crossed the channel on a one-way ticket, and I never looked back. And television for me came as a result of the charity work I've done in Britain, helping disadvantaged kids get into training, education, and full-time employment. My charity, The Right Course, what we do is we open restaurants in prisons so that offenders can train and learn the art of hospitality and the art of cooking and running a restaurant. So we currently have 5 restaurants within closed prisons in the UK, and we are hoping to open one in every single Britain prison.
That's an incredible initiative. Again, it's so great to see someone who's not from a country have success within that country. France and the UK have always been frenemies, we could say. We often talk about this war between the frogs and les roast beef, as the French call the Brits.
That's right.
Just give us some context there. How far back does that clash of cultures go? And do you still feel that today?
Well, it's historical. People still tell me about Agincourt, and Agincourt happened hundreds of years ago. But we have so much in common. For example, the Concorde, was a Franco-British collaboration. And yet, when I was growing up in France, all I was hearing is that the Concorde was French. So we have been collaborating and partnering for years. And as a Frenchman who has been living in the UK for so long, I know that we are real friends. It just happens at a higher level. And I don't know why it carries on, but I think it comes from our differences. For example, in the book, I talk about how, for example, the differences with, our opinions with sex and love and relationships. And in fact, I am running a restaurant called the First Dates restaurant, which is also a TV show where daters come and hope to find love. And sometimes we can feel that the conversations can be quite cagey, but very soon they open up. They're all, people who are living in Britain, but they open up. And you realize that there is not so much that divides us. We have so much more in common.
No, indeed. And I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. But still, there's always this kind of superficial sort of feeling each other out when you meet someone of a different culture, even someone like yourself who's lived there for so long. Do you feel like your Frenchness is always the first thing people see or notice about you still, or no?
Well, obviously, I speak like that. So there is no mistaking where I come from, But, because I've been in the UK for 32 years now, and, in fact, I left when I was 20. So I've been in the UK longer than I have been in France. And when I go to France, people sometimes tell me, well, you are not fully French anymore. But of course, when I'm in Britain, I'm definitely not fully British. I feel seriously British and I am very French. But what happens is after all these years, you kind of take on, some of the nature and the characteristic of people. For example, the Brits, they apologize for everything all the time, whether they're responsible or not. And during the Olympics, I was walking on the Champs-Élysées. I was walking up. My daughter was competing for Team GB, actually, in the diving. She subsequently won a medal. And I was walking up and somebody bumped into me. I turned around. I went, so sorry. And this lady just walked past me. I went, pfft. And the irony wasn't lost on me. I was just publishing my new book, Seriously British, about the differences and the quirks between the French and the Brits. And here I am acting very British in France, in my own country.
Your third culture, as we say these days. So you have described your book, Seriously British, as being a Frenchman's love letter to the UK. And it is funny because, many of the things you talk about in the book, like British food and wine, are usually things that the French make fun of. I mean, your mission is to debunk these French myths about the Brits. So what for you is the biggest myth, would you say, to start?
Well, the biggest myth is that we are not friends. This is not true. I mean, it may be that we have opinions, we have views, which are very superficial. But when people, whether they are Brits or French, go to each other's countries or houses, people invariably get on and people like each other. I think that we have to get past these differences, that historical differences, really. But I think it takes time. And I think that what happened with my book, and people come to me and they say, Fred, I love your book because I can recognize myself in it. British people recognize themselves and they can see themselves. And therefore, they can see what they do right and what they do wrong. And the same for me.
And there's not just things that are about personality types. I mean, just the weather. The French are always complaining about how it's always so rainy and gray in the UK. But I don't know if you've been following, but the weather we've had here in France these last few days, I'd say actually the opposite is true. Do you think that the weather has any kind of effect on the British type?
Well, I was on the phone with my mom yesterday and, she's retired. She's 76. And she says, Fred, I couldn't get out today. It was raining all day. It was awful. It was so gray. Me and your dad, we just stayed in front of the TV. So I think that at the moment, weather is changing, when the very fact that, for example, in Britain, we are making better and better wine. The sparkling wines, for example, are winning a lot of blind tasting competitions, even ahead of champagnes or cavas or sparkling Italian wines. So things are changing, and what's happening in terms of the food in Britain, and is that there is a rebirth, a renaissance, if you like, of a produce, because it's all about produce, and it's about the fish, it's about the larder, it's about all the beautiful meat, and we've got a lot of people who are championing this produce, and as a result, the standards are going up, and people are eating better and better.
Which is good to hear, because the touchy subject seems to be between the French and the British is the cuisine. So given that, Fred, and given how you have a foot in each country, so to speak, we've prepared for you a series of comparisons. I'm going to give them to you, and I want you to pick the one you like the best and very quickly why. Okay?
Okay.
Here we go. Fish and chips or steak frites?
I like them both. I like them both. You can't do that to me. I'm sorry, I like them both because they are so typically French and British. I like them both.
Okay, here's another one. Poulet rôti, so roast chicken, or Sunday roast?
I like a poulet rôti, but the poulet rôti can be a Sunday roast.
That's
the thing
true.
is, in France, I remember when I was growing up, I could have a poulet rôti on Monday or Wednesday or maybe on Sunday. But the Sunday roast, of course, is typically British. It's on Sunday. It could be beef, pork. It could be lamb. It could be, so many different things. But a Sunday roast on Sunday is beautiful, I have to say. Yes. Okay,
one last comparison just to wrap up. This might be a tricky one. Croissant or bacon sandwich?
Oh, but what are you asking me all these difficult questions? Have you ever had a delicious bacon sandwich on a Friday morning with beautiful white bread, some butter, lots of pepper, and some brown sauce? This is so delicious. And if you're a French person and you've never had it, you've got to have it. Of course, I don't have to sell the croissant. Everybody loves a croissant, never mind the day of the week. But yeah, a bacon sandwich. This is beautiful.
Fred Sirieix, thank you so much for sharing this Franco-British comparison with us today here on Paris Direct. Your new book is called Seriously British, and it's out now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.